everybody. Welcome to the April 27th, 2020 meeting of the Wilmington Board of Selectmen. If you'll bear with me, I'd like to read the following. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 orders suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A, subsection 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, members of the public who wish to watch and listen to the meeting may do so in the following manner. Our friends at WCTV on Channel 9 at Comcast, Xfinity, and Channel 37 for our friends on Verizon Fios. And we are also live streaming at WCTV.org. This meeting of the Wilmington Board of Selectmen is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of the members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. Members of the public who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may also do so via telephone by dialing 1-646-558-8656 and enter the meeting ID 954-4291-1037, then press pound and press pound again at the next voice prompt. Members of the public attending this meeting virtually will be allowed to make comments if they wish to do so during the portion of the meeting designated for public comment by the following steps previously noted, then pressing *9 on their telephone keypad. This will notify the meeting host that the caller wishes to speak. All callers using this feature will be placed into a queue in the order that they are entered into the prompt. In the event that despite our best efforts, we are not able to provide real-time access, we will post a record of the meeting on the town's website as soon as we are able. And so with that, good evening. I will go by roll call to make sure that everybody is present. Selectman Kyra?
Here.
Selectman Eaton?
Here.
Selectman McCoy?
Here.
And Selectman O'Mahony?
Here.
And I'm coming to you live from our downstairs toy room from the Bendel House, so all members are present. We also have our town manager, Jeff Hull, is here, and we'll have a few other guests as we go along this evening. I also want to remind folks that, if you can believe it, this is our third remote meeting since this all began, so I hope everybody at home is staying safe, along with my colleagues. And we want to thank our town IT director, John O'Neill, making sure that this meeting can happen live for us. So thank you to Mr. O'Neill. And I know he's been a busy man with all these virtual meetings, doing a great job. So we really appreciate all his efforts here tonight. And with that, I want to thank all the members for wearing blue for autism awareness. Thank you so much to continue that going. And with that, would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of Allegiance. To the flag.
To the flag.
Of America.
To the republic.
And one nation, under God,
indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. We have first up Treasury transmitting of Treasury warrants 42, 42A, 43, and 43A. Is there a motion?
Selectman Kyra makes a motion.
Selectman Eaton, second.
Thank you, gentlemen. We have a motion and a second. We'll go down the line. Mr. Kyra?
Yes.
Mr. Eaton?
Yes.
Mr. McCoy?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony?
yes.
And Mr. Bendel is a yes. It's unanimous. Thank you. Next up, we have approval from our March 30th meeting, 2020. If you'll recall, that was our first ever virtual remote meeting. Is there a motion?
Selectman Kyra makes a motion to approve.
Thank you.
Selectman Eaton, seconds.
Thank you, gentlemen. Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Nope.
Seeing none, we'll call for the vote. Mr. Kyra,
Yes.
Mr. Eaton,
Yes.
Mr. McCoy,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony,
Yes.
and Mr. Bendel is a yes also. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. And with that, we will move to our first appointment, which is with our Health Director, Shelley Newhouse, and our Fire Chief, William Kavanaugh, for an update on the COVID-19 pandemic. So I want to welcome you both. Good evening. and I know that you two have been very, very busy in keeping all the residents safe and informed. So without further ado, Ms. Newhouse, would you like to give us a quick update?
Sure. As some of you have made, or hopefully everyone has seen, Advinia is the long-term care facility is now a COVID recovery site. So I'm not going to be reporting their details anymore because it's just too difficult to get the data with the patients that come in, because every patient that gets reported, it gets reported to their town that they reside in. So it just wouldn't be, it would be too difficult for me to track that data. I can still track the data for the residents that they currently have living in there that are from Wilmington. But I still am in contact with them daily about what's going on out there and anything that they need. So we're still keeping track that way. Care One is up against it right now. I speak to them daily. They have 45 active positives right now. And I mean, their number just keeps going up and up and up. They are pretty good with their staff and how they're handling everything. We've offered assistance to them. They said that they're okay. They don't need it. They are. They do have an epidemiologist that's working with them directly from the Mass Department of Public Health that's helping them track their cases. So I think that they've got a pretty good handle on it. It's, you know, these nursing homes and long-term care facilities across Massachusetts are just so, you know, they're taking the brunt of this more than anyone else. And it's been really difficult for them all. Windsor Place is, I think that they've had an uptick as of today in symptomatic patients. So that was only a matter of time, I think, that they started to see this infiltrate in their community. So I put them in touch with DPH and the National Guard as well to see if they need to come in and do testing for them. I don't know if you guys had seen, but the governor today came out with introduced some new guidelines for nursing homes and long-term care facilities. There's some strict rules that they'll have to adhere to. They include testing requirements, having proper PPEs, staffing guidance. It's a 28-point checklist that these long-term care facilities and nursing homes have to abide by, and they will be doing audits to make sure that these places are adhering to the rules. So far, Care One and Windsor Place will probably be, you know, the next two in our community, or the only other two that we have to forge this battle, which it's been sad for them. I feel for the community members that have families there. There is the nursing home resource line that anyone can call. I posted that today on Facebook and in the town's website. So if you have, yep, there it is right there. If anyone has any questions about any nursing home anywhere that their family is at, not just Wilmington, you know, you may have a family member in a nursing home somewhere else. That's the number that you can call to get any information about them. 7 days a week, like it says, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Great.
So I hope that the people continue to do social distancing. I feel like that is really, it's so important with the nicer, well, you wouldn't know it today, but the nicer weather that's coming, you know, really try to adhere to the less than 10 people gathering rule outside. You know, if it still doesn't mean visiting and hanging around with your neighbors and having barbecues and hanging around the fire pit, even though you think that you're social distancing, you know, you really should just be doing it within the confines of your own family. I think that Wilmington is maybe in a plateau. I mean, I'm seeing our numbers kind of stick around. We have 34 active positives right now, but you know, every day that changes because you go back 2 weeks and you have people that have recovered, but then as more people recover, you just get more positives. So it's kind of like a give and take. You know, our numbers are kind of hovering around 34 to 50, but that's, you know, you take into account, like I said, the people that are recovering, and then just the more positives that you get. And then after every 2-week period, you kind of wash out some of the quarantines and isolations, and then you reevaluate your numbers. So we have, right as of today, I have 6 people in quarantine, but I'm sure that will change. Even tonight, that'll change. So we're just, you know, community tracing and contact tracing every day. My staff has been so great. They deliver masks and gloves to anyone that needs it. I'm getting some food delivered to a family that in town that needs it. It's just, they've just been wonderful, and it's nice to, you know, you never think that Wilmington as a community would have to worry about people that are hungry or that need things, but this is just an ever-changing world. So it's sad, but we'll get through it together. That's, you see that posted everywhere, and it's really the truth.
Absolutely right. Well, thank you, Shelley. And I know I'm going to turn to Chief Kavanaugh in a second. I know if you don't mind sticking around, I know some
Sure.
of my colleagues might have questions for you in a minute. I want to turn to Chief Kavanaugh, who's also the head of our crisis management team. So with that, Chief, your department and the police department dispatchers have been extremely busy. Could you give us an update from your end, sir?
Yeah, thanks for having me tonight. So I love your shirt, by the way. We appreciate the support.
Got to support the first responders. Thank you.
We love it. So no, Shelley's team has been doing an excellent job. We're in communication usually daily, along with her, Mr. Hull. You know, the firefighters have been doing a great job. You know, there's a lot of extra decontamination that needs to be done to our trucks, to our equipment, to the guys themselves. They've been doing a good job with that. Deputy Posey and Lieutenant Woods have been doing a phenomenal job tracking down and getting us PPE. So we're doing a good job with that. We have plenty of personal protective equipment. We've been sharing that. You know, with the police, I actually called Shelley today. I have some additional masks for her as well that she can use that we're getting through FEMA. So we're seeing a slight decline in call volume. However, the severity of the calls that we're dealing with and the amount of frequency of COVID positive patients that they're coming in contact with they make up probably the largest part of our call volume right now. So, you know, like I said, Shelley's been doing a great job. The guys and girls down the firehouse, the police station, dispatch have been phenomenal, trying to keep everything together and keeping each other healthy and safe during, you know, like Shelley said, very odd times right now. You never know what you're going to walk into, and they've done a good job with that.
Absolutely. Mr. Hull, I want to turn to you for a second because maybe you can just inform the board and the members at home. We've been having some conference calls with our state delegation. Maybe you just want to speak to that real quickly. We've been getting updates from our state delegation. Shelley's been on the call, Chief's been on the call, and we've been trying to get as much information, especially out of VineaCare, as much as we could. You want to add to that?
Yes, we have had multiple conference calls over the last 3-4 weeks anyways. It largely focused on VineaCare. Certainly, it's no secret that at the outset of this outbreak, they had some challenges with their staffing situation, communications. The last conference call we had, again, with our legislative delegation, Senator Tarr, Rep. Robertson, and Rep. Gordon, as well as Chairman Bendel, Chief Kavanaugh, Shelley Newhouse, probably forgetting other people on the call, but and Chris Hannon, who's the COO at VineaCare. It appears through really the collective efforts of everyone on that conference call, they've been able to obtain additional personnel resources, which was clearly one of their issues, between a combination of their own staff that were impacted by COVID and down and out, so to speak, as well as the number of patients they were dealing with, that became a real challenge for them. Many of the, as we understand it, many of the staff have been able to return, have fortunately recovered. They've also received supplemental staff through multiple resources, including a recruiting agency, and they've been working with MEMA and the Department of Public Health and also Partners Healthcare. Based upon the call we had on Thursday, it appears that their staffing situation has stabilized, and as a consequence, they're now, as Shelley mentioned, in the mode of bringing in COVID patients from other facilities. We've been told that they've essentially segregated the current residents there so that they're separate from the patients coming in. And for the moment, it appears that their situation is more in control. We'll certainly be monitoring that. I know Bill and Shelley are in touch with them on a regular basis. One of the issues also early on was communication, or a lack of communication, and we're told that they've been able to provide iPads and laptops so that individuals who have family members at the facility are able to engage in more regular dialogue with their family members. So those things, from what we're told, seem to be happening. And again, we'll continue to monitor that, and if necessary, we will step it up again. But I think they seem to be in a better place.
Thank you, Mr. Hull. Okay, so I'm sure there are maybe some questions or comments, so I'll go down the line. Mr. Kyra, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, sure, Mr. Chairman. First, let me say thank you for the work that Shelley and her staff are doing on behalf of the residents of Wilmington, and of course, Chief Kavanaugh and his staff, as well as Chief Desmond and the police department. First responders are top notch in the town of Wilmington. And Shelley, just a quick question in regards to, and Mr. Hull alluded to it when he mentioned current residents. I'm assuming the residents before it became a COVID-19 facility. Are you going to track the current residents and also the deaths that are occurring? I heard that there's quite a few over there.
Yep, those are still,
and also in the other two facilities. So
yeah, those are all reported to the Board of Health. Yep, every day, all day long, I get, every case is assigned a number, and it all gets reported and tracked all along the way. Everything, if they're hospitalized, if they pass away, if they return back to the facility.
Have they told us, is the Department of Public Health or at Vinia Care, this gentleman, Chris Harmon, has he told us how many COVID individuals are coming into that facility? It's a 142 bed facility, correct?
Yeah.
And there's what, maybe about 60 original residents still there from the original 98 or so?
Yeah, I think they have about 78 beds, I'm around that number, give or take, that are going to be open for people to come in. And as they took a COVID, I think they only have 2 or 3 right now that they've taken in. Okay. So I expect that to change, daily.
Okay. And Chief, how are the calls been over there? You're getting a lot of calls to those facilities, the Advinia Care One and so
we
forth?
are. So not as many at Windsor Place currently, knock on wood. However, yeah, Advinia and Care One have been on the regular lineup, so to speak, for the last couple of weeks. We unfortunately, besides the COVID calls, there are still, those people do still have some pretty significant health issues outside of that. So whether they're COVID positive or not, there's still other issues that we're dealing with, and the COVID is as a side to what's currently going on with them. So yeah, I mean, there's been days where the guys and girls have been there 3 or 4 times in a shift. So they are making up a large brunt of our call volume currently.
Thank you. And once again, thank you both for what you're doing for the residents in Wilmington.
Thank you, Mr. Kyra. Mr. Eaton?
I think Mr. Kyra actually took the question I wanted to ask, but I have no questions, just both to Ms. Newhouse and Chief Kavanaugh, keep up the good work. I think we're in this for the long haul, and I think the work that you folks and your staffs are doing is very much worthy of our gratitude. So thank you very much, and please keep it up.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eaton. Mr. McCoy?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate what Shelley Newhouse and the chief are doing on behalf of the community. Shelley, maybe this is directed towards you. And I don't have my phone with me if I need to get it, because somebody from North Reading sent me a quick text. Are we making it mandatory, or is it not mandatory for folks to wear masks going outside, for example, into supermarkets or going to their favorite restaurant to get something as a takeout, or going into the drugstore, or even going into, like, say, the auto zone? Just want to ask that quick question. Are we doing anything?
We're not, Wilmington is not making that mandatory. I got some guidance from the community coalition that I belong to, that according to the AG's office, it is just advised that people wear, towns can only advise that people wear masks when they go out into public. But you know, we're not making it mandatory, no fines or anything like that. I just don't think that it's tough enough to get these PPEs. I just don't see how we could make it mandatory for people when they leave their house to put that on. But you really, if you have them, you really should be wearing them.
Yeah, and I understand that. And who would have the authority to do that? Wouldn't the local board of health,
Correct.
if you determine they'd have that power to do that if they wanted to implement that?
They do. And we discussed that at our last meeting that we had, a Zoom meeting last week, and they weren't ready to institute anything like that in a public health order.
I understand the mask got to go to the first responders, but you know, people like a woman would have a kerchief or a bandana or any type of, I think anybody, I mean, hey, believe it or not, I'm a dinosaur, but I'm looking onto the phone and the Facebook, and I see people making masks out of socks, and I've even experimented with myself. And there are a lot of really wonderful folks out there that are on their own, spending their own money making these masks, meeting outside the police department or somebody, other families. And, you know, I think that's something that maybe the Board of Health should really take a look at, because I think if anybody going into a supermarket or going into a local restaurant for a takeout, I think residents, when they leave the house, they should have at least some type of coverage on their face. I really think we should do that. And I don't think that there's not a non-supply of it. It's within your home. I mean, you can take, and I'm watching somebody rip off a part of their sock, and I've done it myself, and they you can put it right on, loop it through over on their ears. I mean, I think there are folks out there that can have access to that. And I really think that's something we should probably consider in doing. I mean, I'd feel more comfortable if I'm going out. I try not to, but I do take a ride around town. I want to take a look at things. I'm within the confines of my car, but if I need to go in for a drugstore to pick up my prescription, I make sure that I'm fully masked. I put on gloves. I mean, I think we all need to do that. It's not a panic thing, but I think it's only makes common sense to do something like that.
Sure, I can take it up with them again at our next meeting. We're in the process of scheduling another meeting. Actually, today I sent out a poll to see what dates they were available.
Yeah, and I don't know the thoughts on the manager or any of the members. I'd like to kick that around, but I seriously wish they would consider that sooner than later. I think we should just do that. And because I'd feel more comfortable if I was working somewhere and somebody's coming to see me, and vice versa, that I'm wearing a mask. And you can make one, just even a simple, I mean, bounty paper towels, I folded it, put the staple in the elastic. You can do it. You can do it, you know, and if I can do it, you can do it, you know. That's all. I just thought I brought that up. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy. Mrs. O'Mahony?
Sure. I just want to echo everyone's thanks to you all and your staff for what you're doing, and just ask the question. I think I've asked every other time that you've presented to us, is there anything you need right now? Is there any extra support that we can get for you right now that you don't have?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
No, I think we're doing pretty well. We've been, you know, kind of plugging into any avenues we can get for equipment and PPE. So right now, I think we're very pretty well off.
Good. And I guess Shelley, I'll take the gauntlet of being the social distancing police for you again. It's still frustrating, and social media is a great highlighter of when people are breaking the rules, like Selectman McCoy is talking about. Let's always exercise common sense and follow the rules as much as we can. I particularly the demographics I'm dealing with in my own house are the teens who don't think they need to be doing anything different right now, and realizing that it's not okay to be getting together, even if it's in the SPL, it's not okay. They should be wearing masks as well. And then the elderly, my mom has had to go to the hospital twice in the last few weeks, not for COVID related stuff, but it's amazing to me how many senior citizens still don't think they need to wear a mask.
That is correct. They do.
So,
this isn't going to end on May 4th. This isn't, it's just not. May 4th isn't going to be, open up Wilmington May 5th. I see it being this carried out for a while longer. And that we'll hear hopefully early this week from the governor regarding that.
So I guess I want to remind everyone to keep following the rules, keep doing what we need to do to get this over with. That's it.
Thank you, Mrs. O'Mahony. And just lastly, want to thank you both. Please feel free to reach out if Mrs. O'Mahony's last question does change, or if you do need something from us, if there's anything we can do. One of the last questions I had, Shelley, was for you in regards to if somebody wanted a mask. I know it was made mention just a little while ago. I totally agree. People are going above and beyond, creating masks, getting very creative. But what if someone wanted a mask? I know last couple of weeks, all the days are blending together. At one point, you were offering masks to small businesses. What could they do? Could they reach out to your office?
I don't have enough for small businesses, but I have them for the residents, so they can still email me, our office, or call us, and we have a list, and we go out daily and deliver our gloves and masks to anyone that needs them.
Great. I think.
And then with the extra supply that Billy's giving me, we'll have more. It'll be good.
Great. I think that's really important for people to hear, that if they're in need of a mask, that you're delivering too. So it doesn't mean that, if somebody's not mobile, they're at home and they're nervous about, going out, that you guys will deliver. Your staff has been fantastic with that. So that's great to hear. Well, we really want to thank both of you for all your hard work. Chief, I know you're going to stay on for our next appointment, but Shelley, really appreciate it. I say it time and time again, but I really appreciate the time and the effort you put into the information you're putting out. It's very concise, it's very clear, very detailed, and I think it's keeping the residents really informed. So I really appreciate that. And just a couple quick other things in terms of the COVID update, if folks didn't see. Unfortunately, for our students, school has been canceled for the remainder of the year. I shouldn't say canceled, because they'll be learning remotely, but there will be no in-school classes moving forward, as the governor outlined recently. And so I want to give a quick shout out to the class of 2020. We're all thinking of them tonight, and all the students and teachers who are doing a fantastic job in Wilmington learning remotely. And lastly, I'd like to conclude this segment by offering our condolences to anybody who has lost a loved one during this pandemic. It seems like we are seeing more and more bad news on the TV every day. Some of those really hit close to home to people in Wilmington, and maybe even to some of you. So we want to offer our condolences to anybody who's lost a loved one during this pandemic, and we're thinking of them tonight. So Shelley, thank you.
Thank you.
And we will move on to our next appointment, which is with Chief Kavanaugh, with some really good news, Chief. And I don't know if, Jeff, do you want to set this up, or do you want to pass the torch to the chief on this one?
Well, let me just offer a couple of comments and then turn it over to the chief. But this donation really came about through some conversations that Pam McKenzie had with one of the banks that she works with, Lowell 5. And this was two or 3 weeks ago now. She came to me and indicated that the Lowell 5 on I guess a yearly basis makes grants available to some of their private sector and public sector customers. And she indicated that there was a grant available in the amount of $10,000 to communities or private sector companies for a variety of purposes. So with that, I mentioned it to our IT director, John O'Neill, who then had some conversations with Chief Kavanaugh. And then with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Kavanaugh.
Chief?
Thanks, Jim. So yeah, I mean, this is a great thing for us. We, you know, as many people know, we do a lot of ambulance runs. We have to do those reports on computers, and the computers we currently have in there are called a Tough Book. So it's like a laptop, but it's pretty rugged. They're used by the military, and they're old. They're, you know, getting aged. We did replace both of them, and then the last 4 years with some refurbished units. However, those, again, as the updates come to the ambulance reporting software and some of the other things that we run on it, they're slowing down quite a bit. So I had talked with John O'Neill during the budgeting process to kind of see where he was at about getting us new computers, because they're IT, they go through his budget. And we hadn't really put in for them that yet for this fiscal year. We were going to wait until fiscal 22. Through this grant, once Pam mentioned it to him, he indicated to me that he could do it through the grant, and asked if that was something we'd be interested in, which obviously we are. I'd love to get you know, the latest and greatest into the trucks, you know, no matter what they are. So for these are called Rhino tabs, which are on the same premise. They look very similar to what the police are running in their cruisers. The only difference with these ones is they're removable, because we do need patient or medical provider signatures when we go to the hospital. So we were actually able to get them Lowell 5, like Mr. Hull said, it was a $10,000 grant. They actually picked up the additional just over $2,000. So it becomes about a $12,000 grant once we change out the mounting docks and the installation into both ambulances. And once we replace the ambulances, these move over with it. So it's not, they don't leave with the trucks when the trucks get traded in or otherwise disposed of. So, I mean, this was really, I'm just the recipient of other people's hard work. You know, Pam McKenzie identified it. John O'Neill did all of the legwork on it. So I really can't take any credit for this one. I'm very thankful that they thought of us. I know there's other places in town that absolutely had some IT needs. And, you know, the fact that we were able to take advantage of this grant is a testament to how, you know, how well we all work together as department heads to, you know, identify the big picture and what helps us as a whole. So I got to really put my thanks out to both of them on this one.
Absolutely. Fantastic collaboration by all of you. Our thanks to them as well, Pam, John, and our friends at Lowell 5 as well. So this is great news on this donation. So I'm sure the members have some remarks here. Start off with Mr. Kyra, please.
Sure. This is wonderful news. It's always great to keep fire department with the best equipment that is possible out there. And a big thank you to Pam McKenzie and John O'Neill for the work that they did on behalf of the fire department to do that. And the one thing that I do like, Chief, is the fact that these can be moved from one vehicle to the other. So that's a big plus in that regard as well. So kudos to all of you for putting this together for the town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kyra. Mr. Eaton?
Yes, it's my understanding that we only asked for 10,000 and we ended up getting a little over 12 for this, correct?
That's right.
That's correct.
Yeah, so Level 5 actually went above and beyond to help us, our first responders out in this. So I'm glad that the collaboration that preceded this took place, because certainly it was an untapped resource and helped us out. So great work by all involved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eaton. Mr. McCoy?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, a big thank you goes out to Lowell 5 for their contribution in this great endeavor. And it's something that's really needed. And what a time to get it right now. And Chief, I think everyone does a fantastic job, especially the men and women that work under you, basically the ones that are in the trenches, and they give out what they can. So just want to thank everything you do and all the men and women at the fire department, all our first responders. And Little 5 really stepped up to the plate and really hit one out of the park. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy. Mrs. O'Mahony.
Sure, just echoing everyone else's gratitude. Basically, this is a great example of what you want to see in a community, business support, what's needed in the community and everyone coming together to accomplish it. So I think, kudos to everyone involved. This is what we like to see, and we'd love to see things like this, more regularly.
Couldn't agree more. And I think it's been said. Thank you so much. We really appreciate the collaboration to everyone involved. And keep coming back with good news, okay, Chief? And please stay safe.
I'm trying.
All right. You take care. Thanks to all our first responders. Please give them our well wishes.
Thank you.
All right. And before we move on to our next appointment, I just want to remind folks that if you're watching at home on TV, WCTV is kind enough to flash the phone number I referenced earlier in the meeting. If you'd like to make a public comment later on, the number is flashing on your screen. It's also in the white box on the screen just below some of our faces. So there's some instructions there if you'd like to make a public comment later on when we get to that portion of the meeting. But up next, we have our town clerk with us. Good evening to Tina Conway. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Good, thanks. You're here to give us an update on, we're trying to establish a date for the town election.
I am. So obviously we don't have any idea what the next few weeks hold for any of us. And when you look at this legislation that allowed us to postpone the election in the first place, it allows us to have an election anytime between now and June 30th. So looking at that calendar and all of the uncertainty that faces us, I think that I would recommend, if you are amenable to it, that we have hold or plan to hold our election on Saturday, June 20th. That does several things. It moves us out another month and a half or so. It moves us towards the very end of that June 30th period. And it does give you a Saturday after that, should the town meeting have to be reconsidered. It gives you a Saturday within that time frame to actually have your town meeting after your town election. That's what I would recommend. If you were to choose a date, you don't have to choose the date tonight, but I don't know whether you're planning to or not, but it gives us enough time to maybe figure out what we need to do in order to prepare for the election. There are recommendations out there. There are white papers out there. The Secretary of State's office has not yet given us any real guidance as to how they think we should go forward in planning the election. But there are some things that, that we've looked at that we think we can begin to start to plan for. And I'd like to go over some of those right now.
Please.
With the June 20th date, there are ancillary dates that come with, okay, you're going to have your election on June 20th. What does that mean for other dates that are dependent upon when that is? So the first thing that would have to happen is we need to have the warrant posted 20 days prior to that election date. So that would be June 1st, that we'd have to have the warrant posted. We would post the warrant just as we normally post any warrant in all 6 precincts. That goes above and beyond the legislation that the state has passed. It says that you just need to put it on your website and advertise it, but we would go beyond that and just do a regular warrant posting. The last day to register to vote would be June 10th, which is 10 days before the election. Normally it's supposed to be 20 days, but the special legislation has moved it up to a 10-day window. And finally, one thing I didn't include on my memo because it didn't occur to me until after I had written it was campaign finance reports would be due on June 12th, which is 8 days prior to the election. So those are the ancillary dates to setting a June 20th date. The last day to register to vote, we're only required to hold sessions from 2 to 4 and 7 to 8 p.m. If we have restored normal business hours, obviously we'd be open 8:30 to 8. But at the very least, if we haven't, then we would make sure that we had availability during the hours that the legislation requires. Hopefully that's not going to be the case, but that's just the possibility. So as far as community outreach is concerned, we have used a couple of different methods to try to advertise the matters of importance with respect to elections already. We have issued, a press release after you folks postponed the election. We issued it to all of the media, the Wilmington Apple, the Patch, the Town Crier, the Globe, WCTV. The other methods of outreach that we will be used and has been recommended, although this is an non-inclusive list, would be to look at whether we could use reverse 911 to inform residents of the new date of the election. We have in the town clerk's office, we have a database with dog owners, and we collect email addresses from any dog owner that wants to give us one so we can communicate with them through email. So what I would suggest is that we farm those out and we use those email addresses and send emails. Even though it's a limited number of people, it's more people that we get to advertise through. We've also established a Facebook page, which I've seen some of you poking around on. So we would use that Facebook page and the town Twitter account, and also see if we could work something out with WCTV to maybe do some kind of a public service announcement or something like that to try to get people to know when the date of the new election is. One of the things that we're trying to advertise as much as possible is voting by mail. And you can do that both as an absentee voter and you can do it as an early voter by mail. Now that doesn't mean we're not going to have, obviously we're going to have an election. We have to have an election and people can come and vote in person. But certainly with an election where you don't have any contested races, this is a great opportunity for people to cast their ballot, and they can do it right now. They're sending applications in right now. And hopefully the vast majority of people who vote in this election will do so by mail and give us the ability to have less and less people at the voting locations. So as far as getting election workers are concerned, the white papers that I've read discuss trying to recruit election workers that aren't in that target vulnerable population. Now, as you know, most of our election workers are in that target vulnerable population. I haven't spoken to any of them yet. I don't know what their willingness is going to be to work the election anyway. But the recommendation is to try to recruit workers from different places. I think that because the election is going to be after school is out, there's a possibility that perhaps we could reach out to groups like the Rotary Club, the Wilmington Interact Club, which is associated with the Rotary Club, which apparently is a service group that is made up of high school students. So we could reach out to the folks who run that and see if there are people that are interested, kids that are interested, that are of age. They don't have to be even 18, not all of them. And we have the ability to even have some kids that are less than 18, 16 and 17-year-olds. We can have 2 per precinct. We could also reach out to the members of the National Honor Society at Wilmington High School and see if they have service requirements and see if they're interested in working, because that population is obviously much better suited to working the election than the staff that we currently use most often. We would train election workers using either remote access like this kind of Zoom situation, or even creating a video and then sending it by email to each of the workers that we have, and then give them an opportunity to reach out with any questions that they might have. We'd have to establish safety protocols for all of the election workers, which would mean and include masks and perhaps plexiglass barriers. There are many things to learn, and I'm beginning to see advertisements for these kinds of things. I don't know yet what I would recommend. I don't know yet what fits the budget. That's all stuff that we're going to need to explore more, but we would have time especially if June 20th were the date. I would also talk about setting the election up. One of the things that we have the ability to do is to ask the Secretary of State's office to give us a waiver on the required number of workers that we have per precinct. And that would enable us to probably create more social distance situations than we normally would have. So instead of having 2 people at that check-in desk, only have 1. So you don't have to worry about the people that are near them. It's the same thing at the checkout table. Limiting, so if they will grant that waiver, which they've told just about everybody that they will freely grant that waiver, we will have fewer people inside the polling locations. I would suggest that we would look at that point to the square footage of each of the locations and do something similar to what the supermarkets are doing, which is allowing only X number of people in to the polling location at a time based on how many square feet there are in the location. That would mean we'd have lines outside. That would mean we would have to put those people that are in line in socially appropriate social distancing situations. So we have to talk about maybe setting up traffic cones or chalk lines or anything like that. I would think that the proper place for us to look into how many people we can have in the polling locations based on square footage might be the Board of Health, might be Shelley, or I don't know what else we would use, but we would certainly look into how we come up with those numbers. I don't know whether it will be appropriate to ask any screening questions of people before they come in. My gut tells me we can't. We can't say, do you feel well today? We certainly, I don't think we can require masks, although I'd like to, because all of that goes to the freedom of being able to go to the polling location and vote. And, there's a lot of complicated stuff with that, constitutional issues even that, that I'm not even thinking of, I'm sure. But I would look into all of that because I don't know if the emergency trumps all of that and allows us to be a little bit more careful about how we allow people in, who we allow in versus bring them a ballot out. All of that would have to be vetted. And as I said, we don't really have a lot of guidance yet on how we're going to do this safely. But I promise you, we will do it safely when we finally are going to do it. We would certainly set up a disinfecting protocol, a cleaning protocol, and that's all laid out in my memo. Writing instruments would have to be sanitized. We would keep some at the in desk. They'd get a clean writing instrument. They'd bring it out and they'd put it in a box at the out table, and then we'd sanitize it and bring them back. And, just that's how we would do that. Disinfect the polling booths. We'd have to have fewer polling booths because we'd have fewer people in the voting location at the same time, allowing us to distance all the workers that are in there more so. So in conclusion, there are certainly a lot of moving pieces that need to be looked at. No more moving pieces than there are in an ordinary election. I will tell you that, just different ones. So I would recommend June 20th because I think it gives us enough time and it sets us out farther and farther from this point. And hopefully things are starting to get back to normal at that point.
Well, thank you very much. Certainly a lot to chew on there. It's a very detailed memo that you've supplied us with. We appreciate that. Sounds like your staff, Linda and Beth and yourself, are very busy.
We are incredibly busy.
No question about it. We appreciate your efforts, all your staff. And I think you're right in trying to set a goal for a date. June 20th seems to be appropriate. In my mind, it's just a matter of whether this board wants to take action tonight or wait till maybe our next meeting when we have a little more detail on what your plan was. I know you mentioned that you're waiting on a little more guidance and we do have time. So I want to put that out there to the board tonight that we can either take action tonight or we can wait till our next meeting, which I believe is on Monday, May 11th, to decide on this, because certainly things are changing. We sound like a broken record saying, every day brings new news and it's evolving and it's uncharted waters. So certainly we'll have some time to debate that. But I want to open it up because I'm sure people may have questions or comments. And we'll start with Mr. Kyra.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Conway, I really appreciate your comprehensive report. I read through it thoroughly and it was a very good report. One thing that I didn't hear you mention, but I thought I read that you would have some plastic dividers for protection for the workers as they come in, which I think is a great idea as well. And in regards to the masks, I understand your apprehension about maybe violating someone's rights, but I think if we had the masks at least available and encouraging them to wear them as they come in to vote, I would suggest that anyways. But I'm sure that you'll find out if this state of emergency allows us to mandate it as they come into a public facility, especially at election time. I agree. I think June 20th is the right time to do it. I would be in favor of voting for that tonight, but I've certainly have my colleagues, I'll listen to them before I make a motion on that. And I would hope that the town meeting then would go to June 27th. But that's my opinion on that as well. So thank you very much on this.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Mr. Eaton?
Thank you, Mr. Bendel. So, Ms. Conway, it's very clear from your memo that you have been quite busy trying to digest all of the information that's been coming out over the past month and a half plus, and trying to, I guess, evolve with the situation. I am glad that you certainly have put a lot of thought and attention into the issue of election workers, because certainly several of our traditional election workers are likely in a high risk category, and we certainly don't want to have an election if it is risking the health of those individuals or any of the residents that are coming to vote, particularly in an election where the ballot is top to bottom completely set. I am glad that you have put the thought into having single-use or sanitized writing instruments, because certainly I could see if that were not the case, that the felt tip marker that people are used, if one person, God forbid, touches their face and then is positive and might not know it, and
Yep.
it could be one of those frequently touched objects that then infects a whole slew of other people. So you have very clearly, I'm very impressed with the amount of detail that you provided us with. I did have two questions. First, you said that you were going to be sending emails to all dog owners in the town clerk database for whom we have email addresses. I know I pay my water bill online. Do you have the email addresses for folks that don't have a dog but might just pay their water bill online? And is that a database?
That doesn't have anything to do with my office. So the only database that we have that has email addresses is the dog owner.
I'd imagine that would go through probably the treasurer collector's office.
That's a possibility. Yep, I could talk to them and see if they, I don't know if they have email addresses or not.
Okay, well, it might be worth just seeing if you can kind of broaden the scope of folks that you can be reaching. My other question is, and I know a few other communities are at least having discussions about limiting the hours that polls are open. And again, under normal circumstances, this is never something that I would want to advocate for. But again, given the health scenario, with the fact that the ballot is top to bottom set, is limiting the hours that the polls are open to something less than has been traditionally done an option?
So actually, we've talked about that. The matter of bylaw and the special emergency legislation doesn't address that aspect of running the election. So the first question I asked town council was whether or not we could ask for special legislation from the legislature to do that without having the town meeting be the people that requested. And apparently, if you folks passed it, you could pass it and it would go to the governor as a request. And if it went to the governor, he may or may not think it's a particularly good idea. And so we could ask for special legislation to be passed. So there is a mechanism to do that. However, the flip side of that is when you shorten the number of hours that you're going to have the election for, you increase the number of people who are going to be at the polling location during the time of the election. So you're almost, you kind of have to weigh it out. Is it worth like if we say, and I think too, because it's a Saturday, why not do it from 8 in the morning until 5 at night? It's a Saturday. Most people aren't working. They can get to the polls. If they can't get to the polls, they could vote by mail. You know, they could early vote. They could absentee vote. But it doesn't work that way if you think about it from the standpoint of trying to spread out the amount of time so that you spread out when the voters are there and present. You know, it's, you know, and then of course there's the issue of trying to get it passed in time for us to know what it is that we're going to do. I mean, you need to know that kind of early on. So when you post your warrant and so when you do all of those other things, you know, so if you're waiting for the legislature to pass it, I mean, I've seen it done. I've done it. I mean, when I was in Methuen, we had a couple of preliminary elections canceled out because we asked for special legislation to, you know, to not have to have it because we had 5 people running and, you know, and a preliminary election would only bring it down to 4. So they bypassed it and allowed us to put 5 people on the ballot in November. And you do that in a very short period of time. So it can't be done. But with the legislature not necessarily in session all the time, you know, it might be more trouble than it's worth and ultimately put us in a place where, you know, you have more people there than you want to at once if you do it. So, but we did talk about it.
Understood, and I appreciate you really fleshing out the rationale behind that. So thank you, Ms. Conway.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eaton. Mr. McCoy, do you or your dog have a comment or question?
Oh, you have any questions? Come on, buddy. I did the good. But I'm his pal. I don't just give him dog food. I give him nice Italian sandwiches when my wife goes to bed. So we're buddies, you know.
Looks
but
like he likes you.
but no, thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I think you know, Tina, you know, for the short period of time I've known the Madam Clerk, I think she's done an outstanding job. And I think, Jeff, you did a great justice to the town by appointing her. I think she does a great job. I'm going to leave it up to my 4 colleagues on what they decide to do relative to the election. But I do agree with Mr. Kyra that I don't think we'd be taking anybody's rights away. I think people should be wearing masks if we're thinking about using young kids to work the polls. And I think fairness to everybody in that building, that everybody wear masks. If I had my way tomorrow, I'd really wish the Board of Health would look at it, make it mandatory that people wear masks if they're going out. I think the sooner we do that, the quicker we can get back to normalcy. That's what I see happening. But I'll leave it up to my 4 colleagues and I support whatever you want to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy. Mrs. O'Mahony.
Sure. Thank you, Tina, for that. I agree with Selectman Kyra that the memo was really well thought out. It seems like you're, you know, trying to address all of the questions that may come up. I agree. I think June 20th makes sense. The 2 things that kind of, when I was reading the memo, the two kind of questions I had were, you know, I was thinking along the same lines of, for safety reasons, you know, the way that those ballots are scanned and then kind of collected right now, my concern would be not so much, obviously the poll workers are going to have gloves on, but not every person coming through might have gloves on. And if you put it in a big collective bin, and then at the end of the day, you know, so that's one concern I have, is there kind of an alternative collection mechanism that, you know, fulfills all of the same safety guidelines of keeping the ballot secure, but also might prohibit them from all being kind of collected in one, you know, the mail-in ballots you can kind of let sit for a few days or however long, you know, the virus might live on a piece of paper. But for that day, the day of election ballots, my concern would just be for the safety of everyone that's going to be handling them, if they're all kind of collected in one kind of big bin together. And the other thing I was kind of questioning is, in general, you know, the 3 polling sites is kind of a big open space that people walk into. Is there a way to kind of modify the physical space so that there's obviously going to be less sites, but is there a way to make it so that people aren't necessarily having to walk through the entire building to vote? Like right now, they're checking in at the front, then they vote, and then they check out at the back, and they basically walk through the entire building. And just from a, you know, the perspective of having to sanitize everywhere we think the public might be, I didn't know if there was a way to kind of modify that process so that they were just kind of in one space, you know, still with a lot of distance, obviously, but so that we wouldn't have to worry about sanitizing the entire town hall, you know, hallways and things like that. Just some ideas. I mean, obviously we have time to think about it. We have time to figure it out and work with, you know, our emergency team. But those are the two things that kind of jumped out at me in reading your memo that I think, you know, we'd have to figure out how to make sure we're doing that safely. But, you know, I helped my mother get a ballot by mail for Burlington where she lives. They moved their election to June already. And I hope, you know, we're just going to encourage people to vote by mail or do it
Definitely.
this way so that we don't have to worry as much about a big crowd that day. And I guess being the only one on the ballot, you know, here, I don't care if I win by 10 votes, you know, so it doesn't need to be a banner turnout this year.
Just got to vote for yourself and you're good.
Oh, well, I don't know about that. You just jinxed me, Mike.
No, I don't think Vegas is going to take any odds even on this election.
I just want people to be safe. I don't think, you know, I think the number one priority right now is the safety of our residents, not, you know,
Yeah.
not this election. Let's get it done so that we can say it's done. But however you think we can do it safely, I think is how we should be doing it.
Ms. Conway, did you want to speak to the multiple locations?
I could. First, I'd like to speak to the collection, the collection container. So the problem with trying to do it differently is those ballots have to go through the machine. The machine is sitting atop the container. So there really isn't any way for those ballots to not, at least at the beginning, end up in that black box that sits underneath the machine. The idea is to sort of have some kind of spray disinfectant, like a Lysol or something. And once we open that up, to spray it and let it sit for a few minutes before they take the ballots out. And of course, they'll have masks on and they'll have gloves on, you know, and, you know, the hand washing will be important. And I don't see any way to not have them collected in that big box. Perhaps opening that up during the course of the election and taking ballots out and spraying them and letting them sit would be helpful. You know, do that at a couple of different intervals during the day. And they could sit in a separate box and they could have already been sprayed so that when at the end of the night, they could work with those first and then just, you know, we could spray the stuff that's still in there. That might work. I have to look into that. I don't know the efficacy of spraying ballots with Lysol. I don't care about you know, what it does to the ballots after the election is over, because I don't have to worry about whether they're going to go through the machine or anything. But I don't know you know, I'm going to have to do some research into the efficacy. As for the location, the problem with trying to shorten the locations, we don't have that many large spots. We probably use the largest spaces available in the town. And the smaller the space, the more people you're going to have concentrated in that smaller space. So I know that the town, and I'm not going to speak to this because I'm not really an expert on it, but I know the town has some fabulous disinfecting capabilities. And so certainly I would recommend we disinfect before the election and disinfect after the election. The two locations other than town hall are the schools. Luckily the schools won't be
Right.
It won't be in session. And, you know, and town hall could also be disinfected, you know, using this special machinery that they have in the buildings department. So that's just what I would say.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask you a question if you don't mind?
Sure.
Yeah, Tina, on those markers, are they a special marker? So when you fill out the ballot, it goes in a machine. If you wanted to use a #2 pencil, could you do it?
You could use a #2 pencil, and I thought about buying the little golf pencils.
Throw them away.
Well, yeah, but I think that the markers and disinfecting them is more effective. The machine reads those markers better. I talked to the vendor and they are recommending that we use markers. So the question then becomes, how do we use them safely? And I think that they've provided us and we've come up with a good way to use them safely, disinfect them, put them in a tub at the front and then at the, you know, and just keep moving them back and forth. I can just see them thrown all over the place and I'm not a big fan of, I mean, I thought that was my first thought, but I think that the machines will read the markers better.
I mean, I think we all know it's going to be a low turnout. What about if we just had one polling place at the high school? at the high, can we do it at the high school? Could,
Well, then you're
I would-
bringing all,
oh, good, at the high school, we're gonna have, probably gonna have real low turnout, have one central location at the Wilmington High School. There's more parking, a bigger building, and obviously you could probably put more people, spaced 6 feet apart. You'd probably be able to get 4 or 5 times the amount of people in that room at a, considered being safe.
well, you're bringing more people to one place. And so you're risking the lack of social distancing more so because you're bringing all people to one place. I think spreading it out is a more effective and, safe way to do it. Also, as far as parking is concerned, the high school has a lot of parking, but it's not easily accessible to the entrance to the building. So I wouldn't recommend that for this. I mean, I at some point would like to always talk about trying to have all our voting in one place, but I don't think this is the election.
No, you're the clerk who works, you're the boss. Whatever you say, I go. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mrs. O'Mahony, did you have anything else to add?
No, I didn't. Thanks, Tina.
Thank you.
And so, Mr. Hull, correct me if I'm wrong, but the board can take action tonight if they so desire, which would give Mrs. Conway and her staff time to plan, or we could wait and maybe the governor has hinted a few times that, that more information is coming from him and later this week, and we could take it up at our next meeting. Is that correct? We could act tonight, or we could wait till the next meeting. Is that correct?
That's right. Tonight or May 11th. I would just say the advantage to tonight, obviously, is that we can begin, I say we, but primarily Tina and her staff can begin planning appropriately for the 20th. But in either case, there'll be adequate time.
Thank you. Yeah, so I would say, in my own personal opinion, I think that if we can give Tina and her staff time to plan, who knows, hey.
They heard that Mike's dogs were on and they decided they needed to join in. Obviously, someone's opened the gate. God knows what other animals are about to join this situation.
That's quite all right. I noticed in Tewksbury, I think they've rescheduled their election now twice, and other towns are moving things around. I like the idea of setting a goal, and if hopefully we can achieve it, and if not, we'll make adjustments as we move forward, but at least we'll have a plan and you guys can act accordingly. So with that, if anybody would like to offer a motion, I know it was mentioned earlier.
Mr. Chair, I say why belabor the point? Let's just make it June 20th. So I'd make a motion that the town election be held on June 20th.
Selectman Eaton will second that motion.
Okay, the motion has been made and seconded. Thank you, gentlemen. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll call for the vote. Mr. Kyra?
Yes.
Mr. Eaton?
Yes.
Mr. McCoy?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony?
Yes.
And Mr. Bendel is a yes. That's unanimous.
Thank you.
So, our goal will be to have the election on June 20th, and we will certainly look forward to more information from your office. Maybe you can come to a future meeting, or if you so desire, and keep the residents updated on where your progress is at.
Absolutely.
Mr. Chair, before Ms. Conway leaves, should we address the town meeting being on June 27th at this point? Mr. Hull?
That's actually, so there's going to be a conference call with a number of us, the town moderator, Chairman Bendel, and others. Wednesday, I believe, is the date to discuss the prospect of moving that date as well. So that's a discussion that we will have on Wednesday. And then make a recommendation to come back to the board.
Okay. I hope the recommendation is June 27th.
Certainly, from my perspective, the idea of pushing it out as far as we can makes sense because we're still in the midst of the virus, and hopefully the time buys us a situation where the virus starts to drop off and we can relax some of the gathering.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Okay. So the vote was unanimous. Tina, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Safe.
Be safe, everyone.
Good night.
Right.
Okay, we'll move on to our final appointment of the evening. And I want to welcome, I think they're out there. There's one of them. Dr. Brand is our superintendent of schools. And I think also Assistant Superintendent Paul Ruggiero is here. Gentlemen, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
All right, we can hear you just fine, I hope. And we appreciate you being on with us. And boy, it's got to be a difficult time to be a school administrator, but we really appreciate all the efforts in trying to keep our kids engaged. So thank you both.
Mr. Chair, if I could just lead off in terms of what we're asking from the board this evening.
Please.
You'll recall that the facilities plan was completed in 2018, and there was a suggestion that the existing buildings that we have, aside from the middle school and the high school, were really, aside from the age, too small to be conducive to the learning standards that are set today by the state. And there was a recommendation for consolidation. There's been some, I'm not sure that there's complete consensus around that at this point, but the one point that I believe there is strong consensus amongst certainly town leadership is that the Wildwood School needs to be addressed. The Wildwood was built in 1955. There's a number of issues that have been talked about in the past in terms of the deficiencies there, everything from the heating system to the distribution of heat, ADA access, lack of fire suppression, a number of issues. So the recommendation was made in at one of your November meetings, the November 25th meeting, I believe, that the school superintendent, the assistant superintendent of business and finance, George Hooper, and myself be authorized to go forward with developing these statements of interest. So the idea being that as much as the Wildwood would be the focus and the priority, in order to provide some flexibility and perhaps have the opportunity to look at consolidation by submitting 6 SOIs, one for each of the buildings, the Boutwell, the Wildwood, the Shawshene, the Woburn Street, the North and the West. If we're invited into the program, to the MSBA program, there would be the prospect of having the ability to look at more than one school if consolidation was in the works. So over the last many weeks, the work of putting the SOIs together, they're essentially form documents that need to be completed, providing a litany of information about each of the schools, both in terms of their facility deficiencies as well as the academic challenges that are faced. That information is in large measure complete. The deadline for submission to the MSBA is May 6th. And so there's 2 votes that will hopefully be taking place here this evening, and then Wednesday, this meeting with the Board of Selectmen and then the school committee on Wednesday. And the request this evening is that the Board of Selectmen authorize the submission of each of these 6 SOIs. And if the board is so inclined to do that, there are 6 separate votes that the board would need to take. The MSBA is very particular about the process that needs to be conducted, and also the language that is in these motions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Brand and Paul Ruggiero.
Thank you, Mr. Hall, and good evening again, everyone. And I'll take this opportunity to extend my thanks to not only Jeff, but George Hooper and also Paul Ruggiero, who have collectively been working very hard behind the scenes to put together These, you might imagine, this has been a little bit more tricky and challenging given the circumstances of the last number of weeks, given the health crisis. But we're here tonight, as Mr. Hall said, to seek your approval in submitting these. The MSBA, the Massachusetts School Building Authority, originally had a deadline for the submission for they extended that deadline to May 6th.
John, did we lose Dr. Brand?
Ducks in a row, if you will. Can you hear me all right?
Can hear you now. I think we lost you for a brief moment.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Is that all right? You can hear me okay?
Can hear you now. Thank you.
And so we're working to line up all of the applications, hopeful support of you as a board, as well as the school committee, of course, as was mentioned this Wednesday, to make these submissions. As was said, this is a very regulated process. It's a very long process, and I think for members of the community that may be chiming in and watching and perhaps not as informed or up to date, this is, I guess I would describe this as the first step in a long journey that the community of Wilmington, not the school department alone, but the community of Wilmington would be taking here to try and explore what the right options would be for our school facilities over the long term. If I may, just a really brief update, not an update, but rather, but sort of a reality check for the age of our buildings at the elementary level. Our youngest, if you will, building is the Shawsheen School, built in 1970 at 50 years old. That range goes all the way up to the oldest, which is the Wildwood, built in 1955, which is 65 years old. So most of the buildings are in the upper 50s in age, Boutwell 59 years old, the North 58, and the West 56, and the Woburn 57. So it is indeed true that we have aged buildings at the elementary level. We have a lot of buildings, of course, as you all know, and through this application process, this would be a journey to explore collectively, if indeed we were invited in as a community, what the best options might be for Wilmington with an eye to the future. This is not a quick process. Some of you may have heard me say this before, or some may recall from past experiences with the MSBA. They generally suggest that for a community that is invited in and successful to be on this path towards school renovation or construction, that you should count on approximately a 5 to 7 year window. And so it is a journey and with a lot of steps along the way, and one that certainly will necessitate involving respective boards such as yourself, the school committee, but of course the community at large as well too. So with that as sort of the backdrop, and then you have the memo with you in your packet that sort of provides an overview of the process and where we would go next following tonight with again, your hopeful successful vote of support. And with that, if I left anything out, my trusted colleague Paul will chime in, and with that, happy to take any questions that I might be able to answer.
Thank you. Paul, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Nope, I think superintendent said everything that needed to be said.
All right. Well, thank you very much, both. We'll go down the line here, see if there's any questions or comments. And then as Mr. Hall indicated, the hope here is to take 6 separate votes. And so before that, we'll start with Mr. Kyra.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the report, Mr. Brand and Mr. Ruggiero. But just a quick question. I know it's a long ways, a long journey, as you put it, 5 to 7 years, probably similar to the high school project. In the meantime, with the Wildwood and such, our building department keeps it in tip-top shape as best it can. But with it being a 5 to 7 year outlier, so to speak, what's going to happen in that meantime, you're talking about, is it going to last that long? And I don't know if I envision it lasting that long. You're working on some sort of plan for the children over there and the staff. I know this might be a difficult question to answer at this time.
No, it's a great question, and well, if I may, I'll jump in and certainly if Jeff or Paul want to add to it. So, as noted in your memo, and perhaps you may recall this back to the time period in which seems like a long time ago, we were talking about capital submissions and a capital item that was originally being brought forward to town meeting that was sort of two-pronged approach, two-pronged aspect, if you will. One was to indeed dig in and try and study at a finer level of detail what the best options might be for elementary school buildings in Wilmington going forward.
It's hard to hear you, Mr. Brand. I'm sorry. I don't know why. Are you talking about the $200,000 study that you're putting out, or?
Yeah. So you may recall. Is that better? Is that better?
A little bit. I guess in my old age, it's hard for me.
Well, I might be having some internet issues this evening, so and I can't blame my kids because they're not on Zoom right now. So anyway, yes, the $200,000, which was originally part of the discussion, you might recall that a little while ago. The proposal is to modify that, and we touched upon that in the memo that you have before you. With the reason being that in follow-up discussions with the MSBA, what has become clear is that should Wilmington go forward with these submissions, and should we be invited into the process, MSBA, would work very closely with us. That's not to say that they would do the work for us, but they would partner from the cost proportion of the formula, if you will, for us to enlist a third party to help study what the best configuration of buildings and options would be. But the second part of that proposal, which has not changed, even though as touched upon in the memo, there's the suggestion to downgrade, if you will, that total proposal of 200,000. Am I there?
We lost you for a brief moment.
Can you hear me? I do apologize. The second part of that proposal, though, which is to stay in tune, is to indeed enlist a third party to help facilitate a study for what options that there might be for the Wildwood to get us through this interim. And so that remains a priority, regardless of these applications. I certainly do have control to last for that much longer. And so I think it's paramount that we figure out what options for the community there are to, at least on a temporary basis, house the students and staff going forward.
Sky, were you able to catch that?
Not really. Maybe I'll listen in on Wednesday to see if he addresses the same issue. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
If Mr. Chair, if you'd like, perhaps I can recap. So essentially, you will recall that as part of the budget, there was $200,000 that was proposed to do a couple of things, as the superintendent said. One was to take a closer, more fine-tuned look at building reconfiguration consolidation. When the facility study was done, as you recall, they had made a recommendation for a particular approach to consolidation. That recommendation, I don't think, is quite frankly in favor at the moment. And I think it's important before we go forward, rather than picking off one building at a time, to take this opportunity to really take a look at the remaining 6 buildings in a global perspective. So part of that 200,000 was to obtain assistance with that piece of the project. And then the remaining piece was recognizing that even if we are invited into the program, there's a 5 to 7 year time frame before we actually get a building constructed. That second piece of the 200,000 was to obtain some assistance in figuring out what do we do in the shorter term with that building. Is it pods? I mean, not pods, but these temporary building facilities. Do we look at adding on to other buildings? There's a whole series of options out there that may or may not make sense. So the 200,000 is going to be recommended to be reduced to only cover that portion of the project, because as we were told by representatives from MSBA, should we be invited into the program, that evaluation of the buildings is going to be part of their process anyways. That would be funded in part through MSBA dollars. So I think the consensus was, rather than engaging in our own process and then perhaps going to MSBA and doing it a second time, let's just do it once.
I think that was a good recap of what Dr. Brand was trying to describe. But Dr. Brand, is there anything you want to add to that?
Better?
It's still cutting in and out. I don't know, Paul, if you want to.
Can you hear me? Sorry.
No, I think that's accurate, what both Superintendent Brand and Manager Hall had mentioned, that speaking with the MSBA is really, you'd be spending money twice, and it doesn't really make sense to go forward with looking at it ourselves, because if we do get invited in, then they will, in partner with the town of Wilmington and any consultant at that time, will be doing the same thing.
Mr. Cairo, come back to you.
No, I'm good. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Cairo. Mr. Eaton.
I have no questions.
Okay. Mr. McCoy.
Yeah, I'll just be quick. I was happy to sign on along with my colleagues a few months ago to get the ball going. And I just want to say real quick, you know, I got a doctor's appointment. I'm out in the morning, I'm out at lunchtime, supper time. I'm driving around town by myself just to sometimes to take a ride. But I got to say to Mr. Ruggiero, I see your car parked there 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning, noontime, 5 o'clock. And when I'm driving, I'm not going here and there. I just like to take a ride around town and see what's going on. I got to say that you have to be the employee of this trying time. You are there all the time. And I got to take my hat. I know the manager's at the town hall, but I see you there all the time. And I've seen the car there on a Saturday. And I just think you were the, prior to Mr. Brand coming, you were the glue that kept this community going after the former superintendent. I just want to say thank you for being there. And he's in town.
Well,
Where are you at right now? I'm just curious.
I'm in my office, but
At the Roman house?
I
There
am.
you go.
Well, thank you, but you know, I'm just one small piece. I mean, there's many people
no.
working, you know, a lot harder than I am from home or wherever in different circumstances and situations. So,
No, I've seen it.
one
I've seen
part of the team. Thank you.
Dr. Brand, I've seen your vehicle there, but I see his car there a lot. And I know everyone's working at home, like we're doing everything we can, but it's visible and you see it. And I just got to say thank you.
No doubt about it. And thank you, Mr. McCoy. Mrs. O'Mahony.
Yeah, I don't know what type of car either of you gentlemen drive, so I just want to put that on the record.
Well, I see the sign, park, superintendent, assistant superintendent. It's
Well,
clear.
I will admit that I've parked in both of those spaces illegally before when I've had to drop something off at the Roman house.
Right, now you know.
Chief
So-
Desmond, are you on the call here? No.
I want to thank you both, and just as a complete aside, you know, in these unprecedented times, I want to thank you both, especially, you know, having 4 kids in the school system right now and trying to keep them. I'm the worst substitute teacher they're ever going to have. And we appreciate you. We appreciate your staff. We appreciate all that you're doing kind of in these times. So I just kind of wanted to say that before I got to my questions. With regards to this project, I know the time frame is kind of the 5 to 7 year for a build, but do we know when we would hear back if we're going to be invited into the program?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We've just received word that Dr. Brand is going to try to call in. So Dr. Brand, thank you. We can hear you now.
Good. I do apologize about that. Sorry. It's from some past experience, and unless anything with their delay, that they've had to endure here because of this COVID-19 situation changes their timetable. I believe it's usually the latter part of August or the 1st of September at the latest, generally, when districts who are applying for what this is, and that's a core program. It's called a core program, building renovation or additions. That's usually when determinations are made. So a fairly quick turnaround, but a pretty robust process that they follow.
Okay, and then the second part of that kind of follow-up question to that is, I know we're applying for the 6 schools that are kind of the older schools in the system, and we're applying for them individually. If you know, for example, we were invited in for the Wildwood, does that mean we'd have to wait 5 to 7 years, or is that something where we can work with the MSBA to start the project and be reimbursed down the road? How does that work generally?
My understanding is that a community can only be in the process of one core program at a time.
Okay.
So there are other grant programs that we have all, I think Wilmington's benefited from, called accelerated repair, which are such things as roof, windows, boilers, but only one core project ongoing at a time. And so that would be our reality. Again, though, submitting multiple statement of interest for these schools, if invited in, and if through a process in which there's a general support, but by the town of Wilmington to consider building consolidation, then the fact that we have multiple buildings with statement of interests or SOIs in the mix would allow us to then expand Wildwood and to incorporate another building or buildings into a consolidated pathway. Again, if the town were to be interested in pursuing that.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
If I may, I don't know if you were also asking, but typically on the reimbursement piece wouldn't take 5 or 7 years. If we were invited in, it's kind of you pay bills and then you ask for reimbursement. So it occurs throughout the course of the project. If we're
Okay, so basically, if we were invited in, they would then help us evaluate kind of the best plan going forward. And then we could begin implementing that plan and be reimbursed for costs. Is that a fair summary?
That's the way it worked in the high school, and that's, I believe, the way it
Okay,
worked.
so we wouldn't have to wait the 5 to 7 years would basically be the time period that we could be fully reimbursed, but we wouldn't have to wait 5 to 7 years to at least begin the process once we have a plan that the MSBA is on board with.
Right, it should be
is really from acceptance to getting into the building, I believe, after construction and so forth.
So just to recall the situation with the high school, that process really started in the late 2007, 8, thereabouts. And by the time the school opened, it was 2015, but clearly there was a lot of work going on in the interim. Once the town was invited into the program, there was identification of consultants, and the first major expenditure was for the feasibility study. So there was a whole lot of work that happened during that period of time, but it was still a roughly 7-year period.
Okay, so Dr. Brand, I know we lost you there for a brief moment. Before we move into possibly taking up these motions, is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, thank you. Mr. Hull really encapsulated what I was trying to say. So I think I'm good unless there are any other questions.
Okay. Are there any other questions from members of the board before we move on? And what I'd like to do here, if there isn't any objection, I'd like to have Mr. Hull read exactly the specific language outlined by your team that you would like to see in the motions. And then if somebody would like to offer that motion, they could speak up and let us know, and then we can move forward. So why don't we, if there isn't any objection, take up, Mr. Hull, we'll have you read the first motion and we'll see if a member wants to offer it.
So this first one would be a motion to be it resolved, having convened an open meeting on April 27, 2020, prior to the SOI submission closing date, the Board of Selectmen of Wilmington, in accordance with its charter bylaws, and ordinances has voted to authorize the superintendent to submit to the Massachusetts School Building Authority the statement of interest form dated on or before May 6th, 2020 for the Wildwood Early Childhood Center located at 182 Wildwood Street, Wilmington, Mass. 01887, which describes and explains the following deficiencies and the priority categories for which an application may be submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in the future. This statement of interest is being submitted under priority 7 and is for replacement of or addition to obsolete buildings in order to provide for a full range of programs consistent with state and approved local requirements, and thereby further specifically acknowledges that by submitting this statement of interest form, the Massachusetts School Building Authority in no way guarantees the acceptance or the approval of an application, the awarding of a grant, or any other funding commitment from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or commits the town of Wilmington to filing an application for funding with the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
Would anybody like to offer that as a motion?
Mr. Chairman, motion to is described by the town manager.
Selectman Eaton will second that.
Okay, we have a motion made by Mr. McCoy, seconded by Mr. Eaton. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll take the vote by roll call. Mr. Kyra,
Yes.
Mr. Eaton,
Yes.
Mr. McCoy,
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Mrs. O'Mahony,
Yes.
and Mr. Bendel is also a yes. That vote is unanimous. Thank you. Mr. Hull, we'll go on to the second motion.
The next motion would be to have it resolved, having convened an open meeting on April 27, 2020, prior to the SOI submission closing date, the Board of Selectmen of Wilmington, in accordance with its charter, bylaws, and ordinances, has voted to authorize the superintendent to submit to the Massachusetts School Building Authority the statement of interest form dated on or before May 6, 2020 for the Boutwell Early Childhood Center located at 17 Boutwell Street, Wilmington, MA 01887, which describes and explains the following deficiencies and the priority categories for which an application may be submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in the future. The statement of interest is being submitted under priority 7 and is for the replacement of or addition to obsolete buildings in order to provide for a full range of programs consistent with state and approved local requirements. And hereby further specifically acknowledges that by submitting this statement of interest form, the Massachusetts School Building Authority in no way guarantees the acceptance or the approval of an application, the awarding of a grant, or any other funding commitment from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or commits the town of Wilmington to filing an application for funding with the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
Would anybody like to offer that as a motion?
I will. Selectman O'Mahony.
Thank you.
Selectman Kyra, second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Mrs. O'Mahony, seconded by Mr. Kyra. We'll take it up. Is there any discussion before we take it up by vote? Seeing none, we'll go with a roll call vote. Mr. Kyra,
Yes.
Mr. Eaton,
Yes.
Mr. McCoy,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony,
Yes.
and Mr. Bendel is also a yes. That makes it unanimous. Mr. Hull, move on to the third motion, please.
Mr. Chair, can I just
Absolutely.
interject a comment? The language is the same with every single request. Is that correct, Mr. Howell and Mr. Brand? Other than the first sentence, which changes the school location. I guess what I'm getting at, do we have to read the whole thing other than just reading the first sentence, which changes the location, or do you need it to be read into the record?
This needs to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Brand, but this needs to be read into the record because the town clerk will ultimately have to certify and provide to the MSBA that these votes were taken as written.
Correct.
Okay, I just was trying to save you some,
No,
just trying to save you some breath there, Mr. Hull, that's all.
That's right. Well, that's why I keep running.
All right.
Be it resolved, having convened in an open meeting on April 27, 2020, prior to the SOI submission closing date, the Board of Selectmen of Wilmington, in accordance with its charter, bylaws, and ordinances, has voted to authorize the superintendent to submit to the Massachusetts School Building Authority the statement of interest form dated on or before May 6, 2020, for the Woburn Street Elementary School located at 227 Woburn Street, Wilmington, MA 01887, which describes and explains the following deficiencies and the priority categories for which an application may be submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in the future. This statement of interest is being submitted under Priority 7 and is for the replacement of or addition to obsolete buildings in order to provide for a full range of programs consistent with the state and approved local requirements, and hereby further specifically acknowledges that by submitting this statement of interest form, the Massachusetts School Building Authority in no way guarantees the acceptance or the approval of an application, the awarding of a grant or any other funding commitment from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or commits the town of Wilmington to filing an application for funding with the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
Would anybody like to offer that as a motion?
Selectman Eaton will make that motion.
Thank you.
Selectman Kyra, second.
Okay, the motion's been made by Mr. Eaton, seconded by Mr. Kyra. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Kyra?
Yes.
Mr. Eaton?
Yes.
Mr. McCoy?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony?
Yes.
And Mr. Bendel is a yes. That is unanimous. Jeff, you're doing good so far. Keep it up.
Be it resolved, having convened in an open meeting on April 27, 2020, prior to the SOI submission closing date, the Board of Selectmen of Wilmington, in accordance with its charter, bylaws, and ordinances, has voted to authorize the superintendent to submit to the Massachusetts School Building Authority the statement of interest form dated on or before May 6, 2020, for the Shawsheen Elementary School located at 298 Shawsheen Avenue, Wilmington, MA 01887, which describes and explains the following deficiencies and the priority categories for which an application may be submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in the future. This statement of interest is being submitted under Priority 7 and is for the replacement of or addition to obsolete buildings in order to provide for a full range of programs consistent with state and approved local requirements, and hereby further specifically acknowledges that by submitting this statement of interest form, the Massachusetts School Building Authority in no way guarantees the acceptance or the approval of an application, the awarding of a grant or any other funding commitment from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or commits the town of Wilmington to filing an application for the funding with the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
Anybody like to make that motion?
So move.
Second.
Motion's been made by Mr. Kyra, seconded by Mrs. O'Mahony. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Kyra?
Yes.
Mr. Eaton?
Yes.
Mr. McCoy?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony?
Yes.
Mr. Bendel is a yes. It's unanimous. Mr. Hull?
Be it resolved, having convened an open meeting on April 27, 2020, prior to the SOI submission closing date, the Board of Selectmen of Wilmington, in accordance with its charter, bylaws, and ordinances, has voted to authorize the superintendent to submit to the Massachusetts School Building Authority the statement of interest form dated on or before May 6, 2020, for the North Intermediate School located at 320 Salem Street, Wilmington, MA 01887, which describes and explains the following deficiencies and the priority categories for which an application may be submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in the future. This statement of interest is being submitted under Priority 7 and is for the replacement of or addition to obsolete buildings in order to provide for a full range of programs consistent with state and approved local requirements, and hereby further specifically acknowledges that by submitting this statement of interest form, the Massachusetts School Building Authority in no way guarantees the acceptance of the approval of an application, the awarding of a grant, or in any way other funding commitment from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or commits the town of Wilmington to filing an application for funding with the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
I'd like to offer that motion.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion made by Mr. McCoy. It's been seconded by Mr. Eaton. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Kyra.
Yes.
Mr. Eaton.
Yes.
Mr. McCoy.
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony.
Yes.
Mr. Bendel is a yes. It's unanimous. Jeff, last but not least.
Be it resolved, having convened an open meeting on April 27, 2020, prior to the SOI submission closing date, the Board of Selectmen of Wilmington, in accordance with its charter, bylaws, and ordinances, has voted to authorize the superintendent to submit to the Massachusetts School Building Authority the statement of interest form dated on or before May 6, 2020 for the West Intermediate School located at 22 Carter Lane, Wilmington, MA 01887, which describes and explains the following deficiencies in the priority categories for which an application may be submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in the future. This statement of interest is being submitted under Priority 7 and is for the replacement of or addition to obsolete buildings in order to provide for a full range of programs consistent with state and approved local requirements, and hereby further specifically acknowledges that by submitting this statement of interest form, the Massachusetts School Building Authority in no way guarantees the acceptance of or approval of an application, the awarding of a grant, or any other funding commitment from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or commits the town of Wilmington to filing any application for funding with the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
Is there a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made by Mr. Kyra, seconded by Mr. Eaton. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the roll call vote. Mr. Kyra,
Yes.
Mr. Eaton,
Yes.
Boy,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony,
Yes.
Mr. Bendel is a yes. It's unanimous. So you mentioned at the very beginning that this is going to be a long journey. You weren't kidding. So we thank you both for being here, for your work that you've done so far, the work that you will do. We want to extend our thanks to George Hooper as well. Jeff, do you want to add anything on that we may have missed before we wrap up and send them off?
No, I think that's it. Just certainly there's a tremendous amount of work that has been done. And I, quite frankly, have not been involved in the details of putting these applications together, but they're very extensive documents, top to bottom, in terms of explaining all the particulars of the schools. So Paul, Glenn, and George deserve kudos for all of their efforts on that.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, is there anything you want to add before we let you go?
I'll thank you for your support, your patience to start this journey. It was a long one tonight with the votes, but hopefully the members of the community will see that this is certainly putting our best foot forward. The results will be what they'll be, but I think that this is the right decision for this time, at least to explore this as a possibility for our community, and we'll cross our fingers and see where it takes us. So thank you for your support this evening. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. And we look forward to working with both of you and the school committee as we move forward. So thank you both, and please stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you as well.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Yeah,
Good
goodbye.
night.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Okay, we're going to transition to communications. Before we do, I want to give my disclaimer here as the seventh inning stretch. We have the phone number at the bottom of the screen. If you'd like to call in and make a comment, the number is being displayed by our friends at WCTV, and also our IT director, John O'Neill, is kind enough to have it here front and center on the screen in white. The phone number you can call 646-558-8656 with the ID number in green on the screen, also using *9 if you'd like to speak. So that'll be coming up later in the meeting. At this point, Mr. Hall, if we could please move to communications.
Yes, the first item under correspondence communications is a letter from Allison Coleman from Lowell 5, and I'll just read one quick clip. It has to do with the donation. The donation amount for the 2 fire ambulance computers was $12,307.25. And she notes, we are happy to be able to support the town this way and are proud of the meaningful relationship we have built over the many years.
Okay,
Next is a memo that I won't go into in great detail, just summarize, but essentially it deals with the farmers market. You'll be hearing a bit about that later under board to consider. But you'll recall that the prior meeting, the request was made by the Wilmington Farmers Market to be able to hold a market on May 3rd. There were a number of very legitimate questions that were raised about the process in light of COVID. And I asked at the time Karen Campbell to have a conversation with Dana Burnham, who's the president of the Wilmington Farmers Market. And in response to the discussions, they've put together a plan which we will talk about shortly.
okay, thank you.
Next is correspondence from Jarrett Balter, who is president of the Wilmington Little League, and this is to parents, guardians, coaches, and the umpires. Unfortunately, as we all know, many of the various programs slated to happen this spring have been canceled, and this is one of them. He's noting that the opening day was actually slated to be April 18th. Unfortunately, of course, that didn't happen. He notes that the priority is clearly for the health and safety of the players, coaches, umpires, volunteers, and families. So spring baseball and softball has been canceled. They are offering refunds for the spring season, and he also notes that families may forego a refund and use the registration as a charitable donation. And he provides the email address WLLPrez, P-R-E-Z, @outlook.com. The deadline date was 4/25, but I suspect that there may be an opportunity if people are still looking to do that. And then he also goes on to provide a link to for those who are interested in developing their skills or enhancing their skills during this downtime. There's a link that's provided for students that want to do that.
Thank you.
Next, under correspondence, is the letter that I sent to Colleen O'Brien that confirms the vote taken by the Board of Selectmen to authorize the 10-year extension on the agreement with RMLD. And so as of that vote, the new expiration will be July 9th of 2040.
Thank you.
Next is an email. This is from Raymond Lepore. I'll just read this into the record. Dear Mr. Chairman Bendel and fellow members of the Board of Selectmen, I have served for a number of years on the Board of Appeals, and I would like your support in the reappointment of another term. Thank you for your time and assistance. Sincerely, Raymond Lepore.
Thank you.
Next is a letter from Paul Bruce Jr. Again, I'll read this into the record. Mr. Hull and the Board of Selectmen, I formally request that the town of Wilmington, MA, renew my constable appointment for the town of Wilmington for the upcoming year 2020 to 21. I thank you in advance for your time and consideration. Stay safe. Best regards, Paul D. Bruce Jr., Constable.
Thank you.
Next, similar letter from Ronald M. DeGiorgio, and it reads as follows: to the Board of Selectmen, please reappoint me as constable for the town of Wilmington, MA. I've been a constable in Wilmington since August 26, 1992. My bond is current and I am still at the same address, 47 years in Burlington, MA. I retired as a Superior Court officer from Superior Court after 28 years, having 4 years added on for being a Vietnam veteran, gave me a full retirement. I now will be doing constable work full-time. I am also bonded as a constable in Medford, Woburn, and Cambridge. Thank you for your consideration. Sincerely, Ronald M. DiGiorgio. And next we have an email from Robert Mallett, who is also looking for reappointment. This is directed to me. My term on the Historical Commission is due to expire shortly. I do enjoy the work we do and would like you to consider me for reappointment. This is Robert Mallett.
Thank you.
And then final correspondence is correspondence that was directed, it was sent certified to Mr. John P. Gogan. This is with regard to the Board of Registrars position, indicating that the board is looking for direction on the term of Edward L. Souza as a member of the Board of Registrars representing the Republican Party, and notes that his term will expire on April 30, 2020.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions on any of the communications before we move to board? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Hall will move to board to consider, please.
Yes, so the first item under board to consider is the discussion about the farmers market. This was brought up at the prior meeting, and as I noted, there were some concerns expressed, and in response to that, in conjunction with conversations that Dana Burnham had with Karen Campbell, she provided a map, if you will, or an aerial photo that each of you should have, that essentially outlines the process that they are taking. I think it's particularly noteworthy that the program they've put together is such that people will order their food items in advance of going to this location, the Swain parking lot, and it'll only be restricted to food vendors. In the past, they've had other types of vendors. This will be strictly food. They will also pay for the items in advance. So essentially what will happen is that on a schedule, people will arrive at the Swain parking lot. The vendors will be set up at stations, so to speak. The individuals who are purchasing the food will pull up to the particular station. They'll be expected to have masks on. The volunteers who will be handing out, or the vendors rather, will also have masks and gloves. They will hand out the items to those individuals in the vehicles. People will not leave the vehicles at all, and then they'll proceed out to School Street. So it seems to be a pretty airtight process for trying to minimize any potential exposure issues. And I guess with that, I know Dana Burnham is on the line if there are any questions that board members have. The proposed date, they were looking to have it, as you recall, on May 3rd. They're amenable to scheduling it on May 17th, which does give us a few weeks to hopefully see some diminishment of the virus.
Yes, Jeff, you indicated we do have two guests with us. We have Dana and Christine. Can you guys hear us?
Yep. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thanks for being with us. How are you guys?
Hanging in, doing well. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate you being on with us tonight, and we appreciate all the work. You obviously put a lot of time and thought into this proposal. Is there anything you want to add before we take questions or comments from the board?
I have one thing to add, actually. We heard from one of our vendors who is not a food vendor. She makes household products, hand sanitizer, cleaning supplies. She also makes soap as well. But anyway, she let us know that according to the state, she's an essential business. So she also wants to participate. So I just wanted to add that to the consideration.
Thank you. Is there anything else that we might have missed that's not in the proposal, or something you want to let the community know before we take a vote on this?
The only, I guess the other thing I'll say is we're having people sign up for time slots. That's not, it says 10 allowed per 15-minute time slot. So people have to sign up for a slot before they can actually order. So we're hoping that will really control the traffic. Just to make that clear.
Great. Well, if you'll just don't mind hanging on just a minute, we'll take some comments and questions from board members, and then we'll go ahead and take the vote. Is that okay?
Sure. Yep.
Awesome. So I know that there might be some questions or comments from my colleagues. I just want to start by saying that I really appreciate Dana and Christine holding off. I think it's been 2 weeks since we decided to put this off and get more information. Clearly, we've gotten a lot more information. I want to thank John O'Neill for putting that diagram back up on the screen so that viewers at home can see that. I know he'll be flashing that again momentarily when we're done here. But I think we've mentioned a few times at these meetings how we really want to support local businesses, and that certainly includes members of the farmers market community. So I intend to support this, and I want to hear from other members as well. We'll start with Mr. Kyra.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. Certainly, there was a lot of care and in putting this all together in order to keep the public safe as they go through this. And I'm just curious, Mr. Hull, I know that you mentioned Karen Campbell assisted with this. Have you talked to Shelley Newhouse, the Director of Health, and Bill Kavanaugh, Chief Kavanaugh, public safety official? Has the farmers market had discussion with them as well, and do they approve the setup of this, and are they satisfied with it?
Certainly, I've talked to Shelley, and she's aware of the proposal that has been put forward, and she believes it is safe and appropriate. I've also had communications with the police chief. Obviously, one of the concerns was traffic, and he is comfortable with the program as presented. I don't recall specifically having a conversation with the fire chief.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it, and I do appreciate all the work that went into this, and I am very supportive of the farmers market, and I'll be supporting this proposal as well. Thank you.
Chief Kavanaugh, did you want to chime in? I saw you just popped up. Thank you. Mr. Kyra had asked if you had an opinion on this.
Yeah, I did have a brief conversation with Shelley and Chief Desmond. I also have no objections to it. It looks like a good, pretty well thought out plan, and I think kind of the best way to move forward given our current situation. So I also have no objection to this.
Great.
Great. Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Kyra. So just to recap, we have positive recommendations from both chiefs and Shelley Newhouse, our health director. Mr. Eaton.
Oh yeah, thank you, Chief Kavanaugh, for kind of filling that in as well, and Ms. Burnham and Mr. Canavari. I know 2 weeks ago we'd expressed, and I was part of that certainly, we expressed just concern as to what the plan was going to be, and I think that the plan that has been submitted certainly addresses all of my concerns, and actually did so in a way that I think is very creative to have a kind of pre-order time slot drive-through farmers market. I think is really a great way to think outside of the box, and I think a great way to keep this tradition going. I will just note that the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources did release a guidance memo on hosting farmers markets, and none of what you guys are proposing is contrary to what is in that guidance memo. So I think it's consistent, and it goes above and beyond what the state is recommending for farmers markets. And it's certainly, I think, a very creative way to kind of adapt with the times. So I will certainly be supporting this as well, and I hope to see you there, but I'll be masked up so you won't recognize me.
Thank you, Mr. Eaton. Mr. McCoy.
Yeah, no, I know a lot of intelligent thought went into this, and I think you've done an outstanding job. I also, with my colleagues, will be supporting it, and I've supported it. What's it going on 10 years now, I believe?
Right. This is the 10th anniversary.
Yeah, no, and I've been here since its infancy, and I think it's a great place for everyone to meet. Unfortunately, during these circumstances, you're thinking out of the box, and I think it's a great idea. Thanks.
Thank you. Mrs. O'Mahony.
I just want to thank you both and your committee for really being thoughtful in the plan. You addressed every question I raised at the last meeting, and then some. You know, Chronicle did a thing on the Seattle public market. I think it was last weekend we were watching it, and they weren't even doing things, I think, as thoughtfully as you have laid out here. So I really appreciate that you put the time in, that you're allowing the vendors to hopefully generate some revenue. You're allowing the residents to have access to this great resource, and you're doing it in a really safe way. So hopefully everyone's going to follow your rules and make this easy to be able to participate in it. So thank you for that. And I support this plan as well.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So as I conclude here, I'll ask John if you could throw that diagram back up on the screen one more time before we call for the vote. And while he does that, I just want to add my 2 cents too, that, you know, I don't see this as much different than when we go to get takeout from my favorite AJ's Kitchen and pick it up. I mean, this is going to be an awesome opportunity for people to pick up some great items, some great fresh food and other items that are sold there, and support local businesses and keep this strong Wilmington tradition going. And I really appreciate all the thought and effort that went into this, because this is a great way to, although we're battling a pandemic, is, you know, keep Wilmington moving forward in a safe way. And so I think people are going to really look forward to this. And with that, if there anything else from my colleagues?
I assume that you're going to put the information on the vendors that are participating, because obviously it's going to be advanced orders. Can you just share with people kind of where they can find that information so that they know how to order ahead of time for this?
Absolutely. So we're in the process of updating our website right now and collecting all of the pre-order information from the vendors that are participating. And so there'll be a page specifically to give our customers instructions on how to request a pickup time slot and give all of the information for each vendor that they'd like to order from. And then, of course, directions on how to proceed through the diagram that you see on the screen. And then we're also on that same, along those lines of giving instructions, we're also providing guidelines as to how they should approach the market. We're recommending that they wear masks and that they stay in their vehicles, pop their trunk, and allow the vendors to just place the items inside their trunk and then move on to the next vendor or towards the exit.
Great, thank you. So they should check your website out.
Yes, it should be updated within the week.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions or comments before we call for the vote? Okay, hearing none. Would anybody like to offer a motion to approve the use of the Swain Green starting Sunday, May 17th?
Selectman Eaton will make that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, the motion's been made by Mr. Eaton, seconded by Mrs. O'Mahony. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, call for the vote. Mr. Kyra?
Yes.
Mr. Eaton?
Yes.
Mr. McCoy?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony?
Yes.
Mr. Bendel is a yes also. Christine and Dana, thank you so much for being with us, and thanks for all you're doing. We wish you much success.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay, please stay safe.
Have a good night.
You too. All right, Mr. Hull, we'll move on to number 7, board to consider, please.
Yes, next one under board to consider are appointments and reappointments by the Board of Selectmen. Would you like me to read through one at a time and you approve them as we go?
If there isn't any objection,
Are we, Mr. Chair, are we approving these tonight, or are we just reviewing them and then approving next meeting?
No, this would be approved this evening. So the first appointment is Animal Control Officer, 1-year term to expire 2021, Christopher H. Sullivan.
okay, is there a motion?
I make a motion, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and second. Any discussion? Seeing none. Call for a roll call vote. Mr. Kyra?
Yes.
Mr. Eaton?
Yes.
Mr. McCoy?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony?
Yes.
Mr. Bendel is a yes. It's unanimous.
Next is the Board of Appeals, 5-year term to expire 2025, Raymond N. Lepore.
Is there a motion?
Selectman Eaton will make that motion.
Okay, Mr. Eaton made the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. The motion's been made and second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Kyra?
Yes.
Mr. Eaton?
Yes.
Mr. McCoy?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony?
Yes.
Mr. Bendel is a yes. It's unanimous.
Next is Board of Registrars, 3-year term to expire 2023, Edward L. Souza.
Selectman McCoy will offer that motion if you may.
Thank you.
I'll
Second.
second it.
Any discussion? Seeing none. Mr. Kyra?
Yes.
Mr. Eaton?
Yes.
Mr. McCoy?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony?
Yes.
And Mr. Bendel is a yes. It's unanimous. Mr. Hull, is it possible that we take up more than one? I don't think there'll be any objection if we tried to think outside the box there and take up more than one of these at a time.
Sure. It's your pleasure. I can just read through the rest if you would like to take them up in one vote.
Any objection?
None.
None at all.
Hearing absolutely none. We'll move forward.
Okay, here we go. Council for the Arts, 2-year term to expire 2022. Diane L. Giambardino, Judith A. Hughes, Linda D. Malloy, Holly B. Papio. Council of the Arts Advisory Board, 1-year term to expire 2021. Louise A. Anderson, Ruth E. Camber. Fence Viewers, the 1-year term to expire June 30, 2021, Paul Aluni, John T. Spalding. Scholarship Committee, a 3-year term to expire 2023, Glenn Brand, Superintendent, Paul D. Kavanaugh, Carol A. King, Robert G. Peterson, and I would note there is a vacancy currently on this committee. Town Council, 1-year term to expire June 30, 2020, KP Law. Special Town Council, 1-year term to expire June 30, 2020, Daniel R. Deutsch from...
Excuse me, Mr. Hall, just to clarify, both of those are expiring 2021.
That's right, I'm sorry, 2021, correct. Special Counsel, 2021, Daniel R. Deutsch from Brooks and Durensis. Constables, 1-year term to expire 2021, Barbara J. Colla, Jason F. Costa, Eric R. Randall, John B. Bridges Jr. I would note that Mr. Bridges and also Paul D. Bruce Jr., Ronald M. DiGregorio, Donald C. Otis, William F. A. Pepicelli, and Anthony J. Sousa. Those last ones that I mentioned, the last 6, there's a restriction not to solicit clients authority to serve civil process for clients who need service in Wilmington.
Just clarification, I have Dennis Otis and not Donald.
I'm sorry, yes, Dennis Otis, Dennis C. Otis.
Okay, that concludes that page. Would anybody like to offer a motion to make these appointments?
Second meeting, I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote on these appointments. Mr. Kyra?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. McCoy?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony?
Yes.
Mr. Bendel is a yes. Those are unanimous.
Mr. Chair, I would just ask if anyone on the board has a name to bring forward to fill the vacancy on the scholarship committee.
Does anybody have a name they want to bring forward? Or if you don't tonight, perhaps you could reach out to the manager in the very near future with that name. Thank you.
Okay, next is, these are town manager appointments subject to the approval of the Board of Selectmen. So I'll just go through again the entirety for the board to consider.
Thank you.
Commission on Disabilities, 3-year term to expire 2023. Phyllis D. Genetti and Jonathan R. Eaton. Historical Commission, 3-year term to expire 2023. Gerald R. Duggan, Robert Nallett, Christine M. Johnston. Permanent Building Committee, 3-year term to expire 2023. George W. Hooper II, John C. Holloway. Permanent Building Committee, 3-year term to expire 2022. This is a new appointment, Michael Kachuk.
Mr. Hall, you broke up there for a second. What was that second name you mentioned?
The second name on which category?
Was that Eaton?
Yes, Jonathan R. Eaton.
Broke up there for a second. Okay, thank you. Is there a motion?
I think his phone battery died.
Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded by Mr. McCoy. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor will go Mr. Kyra,
Yes.
Mr. Eaton,
Yes.
Mr. McCoy,
Yes.
Mrs. Mahoney,
Yes.
Mr. Bendel's a yes. It's unanimous.
The next one is appointments that I have made. Animal Inspector, 1-year term to expire 2021, Christopher H. Sullivan. Building Inspector, 1-year term to expire 2021, John T. Spalding. Alternate is Michael P. Desmond. Carter Lecture Fund Committee, 3-year term to expire 2023, Andrea B. Hauser. Cemetery Commission, 3-year term to expire 2023, Pasquale D'Antonio. Conservation Commission, 3-year term to expire 2023, Laura T. DeWall. Alexander M. Ritterhouse. Elderly Services Commission, 3-year term to expire 2023, Robin Thaidos and John Wallace. Electrical Inspector, 1-year term to expire 2023, Frederick Sutter. Arthur T. Kelly is an alternate, and James F. Largenton as an alternate. James F. Largenton Jr. Gas Inspector, 1-year term to expire 2021, Paul Raffy. Alternate, John J. Mytek Jr. Board of Health, 3-year term to expire 2023, Elizabeth E. Sabunjan. Library Trustee, 3-year term to expire 2023, James M. LeMay and Eileen L. McDougal. Metropolitan Area Planning Council, 3-year term to expire 2023, Valerie J. Gingrich. Middlesex Canal Commission, 2-year term to expire 2022, Betty M. Bigwood, Michael J. McInnes, and Neil P. Devens. Planning Board, 5-year term to expire 2025, Rondi R. Holland. Plumbing Inspector, 1-year term to expire 2021, Paul J. Raffi, and the alternate is John J. Mytek Jr. A Public Wayer, 1-year term to expire 2021, David A. Shagru. Reading Municipal Light Department Advisory Board, 3-year term to expire 2023, Dennis Kelly. Recreation Commission, 3-year term to expire 2023, C. Michael Burns. Veterans Agent, 1-year term to expire 2021, Louis Semaglia IV. Veterans Grave Officer, 1-year term to expire 2021, Louis Semaglia IV. Water and Sewer Commission, 3-year term to expire 2023, George R. Allen. Water Sewer Commission, 3-year term to expire 2022, Joseph J. Valerio Jr. Wilmington Auxiliary Police, 3-year term to expire 2023, Stephen M. Kane, Mario R. DeMecco, and Charles E. Holmes Jr. Wiring Inspector, 1-year term to expire 2021, Frederick Sutter, and alternates Arthur T. Kelly and James F. Largenton Jr.
Okay, is there a motion?
Motion. Mr. Chair, I don't think there's a motion necessary.
Those are just announcements.
Yeah.
Just a question on that, Mr. Chair.
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Hull, you mentioned one of the appointments of Water and Sewer Commission is a 3-year term, but you said it expires on 2022. Whereas the other one is a 3-year term that expires on 2023. Was one of them just filling in an unexpired term, or is that just a typo?
Mr. Bolero's term, that is a unexpired term. I'm actually going to be looking to, he is basically staying on for the time being until I can identify another individual to take his place.
Okay, thank you.
And, thank you, Mr. Eden, for keeping me on my toes. I think I got distracted because I do believe we missed one. I'm getting a message here from our worthy Secretary, Beverly Dalton, that we missed Christopher H. Sullivan on the 1-year term to expire for a constable. I think I cut you off there, Jeff, so we missed that one at the very end. If we could take that up individually. It's at the bottom of the second pink page we had there under constables, 1-year term to expire 2021. At the bottom, after the 9 names, it says Christopher H. Sullivan, only in conjunction with his duties as animal control officer.
That's correct.
Anybody want to?
I'll make that as a motion.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion? Seeing none. Mr. Kyra?
Yes.
Mr. Eaton?
Yes.
Mr. McCoy?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony?
Yes.
Mr. Bendel is a yes. It's unanimous. Thank you, Beverly, for keeping an eye on me. And with that, I want to thank all those volunteers we just voted for in the last few minutes here. We really appreciate your volunteerism here in Wilmington. Okay. Mr. Hull, we're on to our next board to consider.
Yes, the next board to consider is the schedule for the summer. The proposed dates are July 13th and August 17th. As you know, the board historically meets once in July and once in August. These certainly are not committed, but for discussion.
Okay. Anybody have any objections or alternatives?
No.
All right. So we'll take them up together if that's okay. And certainly if something comes up, we can let Jeff know. But as of today, we'll shoot for Monday, July 13th and Monday, August 17th. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and second. Any discussion? Seeing none. Mr. Kyra?
Yes.
Mr. Eaton?
Yes.
Mr. McCoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahoney,
Yes.
Mr. Bendel is a yes. It is unanimous. Okay, I believe that concludes our board to consider items. We will move into public comment. Mr. O'Neill, do we have anybody on the line?
We currently do not.
Okay, let's give it a minute or two. As people may be dialing in, again, the number is at the bottom of the screen and also in the center of your screen. On my screen, it's at the center. It's a white box. It says call 646-558-8656 with the ID number 954-4291-1037 using *9 if you'd like to speak. There's got to be somebody out there who wants to call into our celebrity squares here. We'll just give it a minute here if there are any objections.
No objections, Mr. Chair, but I want to watch another episode of Ozark, so. You know,
It's pretty
no
good.
one's calling in, we might as well move on.
Mr. Kyra, you know Netflix, you can watch whenever you want, right?
Oh, is that how that works? I wasn't sure about that. I rely on my kids to turn that on.
They may start without. So. All right, and one more check here. John, do we have anybody on the line?
We still do not.
This might be a first. All right. If they don't object, any objection to moving on?
Nope.
Last chance, John.
I have nothing.
Okay, we're moving on. Announcements. If any board members have announcements, we'll go down the line, Mr. Kyra.
I'm good, thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, enjoy season 3. It's entertaining. Mr. Eaton.
None.
Mr. McCoy.
I'm good.
Mrs. O'Mahony.
So I just wanted to take a really quick second. This week, you know, this past week was a difficult one, in that it wasn't April school vacation. It wasn't the week leading up to my daughter's confirmation. It wasn't the week leading up to election. It wasn't the week leading up to our last WOW road race. So last week, I have to say, it was a really emotional week for me in a lot of ways. I can't believe we're going into May and we're still having meetings like this, guys. So I just wanted to note, you know, to the students, we're thinking of you. To everyone who's still, you know, plugging away with dealing with this, we're thinking of you. We can't wait. I can't wait to be back in the same room with you guys. I know that's crazy, but I really miss being in the same room and laughing with you. And I just wanted everyone to know, you know, we're in this together, and I think we're all struggling in our own ways, and hopefully hearing me talk about my struggles will make you feel a little less alone, because it's been, this is miserable. I'm going to be hugging people for awkwardly long time. So Jonathan, you've especially been one, because I know how you hate any type of contact, but
it's still, good luck spelling that in the minutes, but
yeah. I hope this ends sooner rather than later, because enough is enough, but we'll keep plugging away, right?
Absolutely. I just want to repeat what I said earlier. I want to give a huge shout out on behalf of the board to the class of 2020 at Wilmington High and Shawsheen Tech. We know it's certainly a challenging time for them and such a special time in their lives, but we're all rooting for them. And I know so many people are going above and beyond to try to celebrate them in unique ways. And we thank everybody for doing that. So a huge shout out to those kids and all the students and teachers that are going through this unique time. And we appreciate them. And in addition to all of our first responders, we can't say it enough on this meeting and the meetings we've had prior, that we're really rooting for all of our first responders. We thank them for their hard work and dedication to our community. And hopefully we'll get through this sooner than later, as my colleagues just said. Any new business, Mr. Kyra?
No, good, thank you, Mr. Bendel.
Mr. Eaton?
none.
Mr. McCoy?
Just real quick, Jeff, any word relative to Cook Street? What's going on? I mean, I just can't understand why councils can't get this thing together.
We did receive the document back from council. I think I had mentioned previously that he had been sick for a stretch of time, but we did receive the document back from council, and I believe it's going off to Olin at this point for their review, and they'll, I'm sure, have their attorney looking at the details, and there'll be some back and forth, I suspect, but we're making progress.
Can we, through you, Mr. Chairman, Jeff, is it all right if we touch base in the next couple of days? Can you find out if Olin's attorneys are looking at this? And, you know, because they said back in October, you know, the old saying, checks in the mail, where is it?
Yeah, no, I mean, to take responsibility for this, it's the document was generated by the town. Council had put a draft together. Mike Woods and I had reviewed it. Had some points that we wanted to make in the document. It went back to council, and you know, I mean, I can't. Obviously, he didn't anticipate being sick, but we're moving on it as quickly as we can.
All right, thank you, Jeff. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Jeff. And if you follow up with the board, that'd be great when you have the chance.
Yes.
Thank you. And Mrs. O'Mahony?
No, thanks.
And I have no new business myself. Mr. Hull, if you could take us to important dates, please.
Yes, the week of May 4th through the 8th is a curbside collection of yard waste. May 6th is a drop-off at the Yard Waste Center on Old Main Street, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Again on May 9th, Old Main Street, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Next Selectmen's meeting is May 11th. Says room 9, but I'm not sure that's going to happen. So we'll be doing this virtually again, I suspect. The
room for 9. Room for 9.
That's right. Current date for the joint meeting of the Finance Committee and Planning Board is slated for May 12th at 7 p.m. Again, I think that's up in the air, and that'll be a discussion point on Wednesday. May 30th, currently slated to be the annual town meeting at the high school. Again, a discussion point, and revised deadline for property tax bills and exemptions and deferral applications is June 1st.
Okay, thank you. And before we motion to adjourn, just want to thank Beverly for doing the minutes tonight, WCTV for helping us broadcast and keep everybody informed. And obviously a huge shout out to John O'Neill, our IT guy. Each time we do one of these remote things, I think we're getting better at it, if I do dare say so myself. And so thank you to John for doing an outstanding job. We're even having graphics on the screen now. Wait till you see what we have next, folks. But I hope everybody stays safe out there. Keep practicing social distancing. We'll get through this together. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Kyra?
Yes.
Mr. Eaton?
Yes.
Mr. McCoy?
Yes.
And Mrs. O'Mahony?
Yes.
Bendel's also a yes. That concludes the meeting. Thank you and good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
You take care.